So this is going to be a bit of a different video since this is going to be unscripted. So it's just going to be me rambling and stuff. So you're definitely going to hear a lot of ums and stutterings. So yeah. So this is going to be a video about my my thoughts on Resident Evil 3 Remake. And although this isn't really going to be a review, but more so me just rambling about the game. So before I talk about that, I want to kind of talk about how I got into Resident Evil, or at least, yeah. So when I was like 18, I was starting to get more curious about Resident Evil, and one of the first games I bought was Resident Evil 3 not Resident Evil 3 Remake. I mean, it wasn't even out at the time, but one of the games I bought was Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, which I would play on my PS3 at some point. I say at some point because at the time I didn't actually beat Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, either because I just wasn't really used to survival horror games yet, or I was just busy with other games or stuff. So Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was one of the first games in the series I bought, but it wasn't one of the first games it wasn't the first game I beat necessarily. I think the first Resident Evil game I beat was, unsurprisingly, Resident Evil 4, because, you know, it's the big one. And but I didn't beat it until I got it on Switch. But yeah, it wasn't until this year. I guess I also did beat Resident Evil 2 Remake. That was actually the first one I beat technically. So yeah. But it wasn't until like this year when I was starting to really get into Resident Evil, since at some point when Resident Evil 7 and System Shock, the remake of System Shock, were both on sale, and I was like, oh, what the hell? I'll go ahead and get both. And I played Resident Evil 7. I haven't played System Shock yet, but when I played Resident Evil 7, I was like, holy shit, this series is peak fiction. And so I replayed Resident Evil 2 Remake and also played Resident Evil 4 the remake, and let me just say, that probably has the best combat in the series. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. I recently played through did a replay of the remake of the first Resident Evil, like the remake of the first Resident Evil with Jill, and I really liked that. It definitely still holds up, even if you don't like depending on if you like take controls or not, it definitely still holds up. And I also did a replay of Resident Evil 2 Remake, and I recently started Village. So yeah, I've kind of been going down the Resident Evil rabbit hole today, or not today, this year, and now I'm here with Resident Evil 3 Remake. So yeah, let's talk about that. So I really do think the intro is where the writing peaks, in my opinion. The cutscene, like the opening cutscene with the scientists building Nemesis and sending him out to Raccoon City, is so good. Honestly, I think my only issue with the intro was the fact that it doesn't show any police officers getting infected by zombies while they're trying to fight off the zombies, which I think would really just emphasize how fucked this situation was, just like how it did in the OG version of Resident Evil 3. Will say though, like, the chase with Nemesis was so good. Like, it was definitely, like, one thing that I liked better here in the remake was how it introduced Nemesis. Like, instead of just killing Brad, Nemesis just chases you, like in your apartment, and it is just so intense, and I love it, and I love this version of Nemesis also. Like, despite the voice, like when he says stores, like, I just really, I don't know, like I don't think anything can top like his voice from the OG Resident Evil 3. Another thing I like about this game is the relationship between Jill and Carlos. Like, just like in the OG game, they start off, like, Jill starts off not really trusting Carlos, but later on, she starts to see that Carlos it really isn't that bad, and that he's actually a pretty cool guy. And I really like Carlos in this game. Like, Carlos became one of my favorite characters in Resident Evil after I played the OG Resident Evil 3, and I like him I think I like him more in this game. Like, he's just so cool. Like, I really don't think he's, like, better than, like, I don't think I like him more than Leon or Ethan Winters, but yeah, I really like Carlos in this game. Jill, however, though, holy shit, Jill is a badass in this game. I can't exactly quote any one-liners, but the one-liners I can remember, like I said, I can't quote any of them, but like, she is just done with everyone's shit in this game, and I am all here for it. So yeah, I really don't know what else to say for this version of Jill, except that she's just so cool. But since I mentioned the one-liners with Jill, one issue I definitely have with the game's writing is, and Spear Hunter, if you're watching this, you're definitely not the only one who was bothered by this, but the fact that they placed the "you want stars, I'll give you stars" in one of the sequences where Nemesis chases after you, that bothered me too. Like, that was a really cool moment in the OG Resident Evil 3, and I really feel like the remake should have kept that in. Or just like in the final boss, that's where Jill says a line. That would have been so much better. Anyway, let's talk about Brad and Marvin. At first, I didn't really like the fact that you met Brad so early on in the remake compared to the OG, but considering what they did with him, thinking about it now, I think the way the remake handled Brad here is better than how it was in the OG. And it's mainly because it shows what happened to Marvin when, like, how he got infected. And it makes his arc, like his character in the Resident Evil 2 remake, so much more tragic. And it also makes Brad pretty tragic, especially when you have to, shoot Brad as a zombie when you're playing as Carlos. It's pretty sad. So yeah, I really don't have much else to say about Brad and Marvin, so let's talk about mechanics then. Now, the mechanics, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because you do get a dodge mechanic, which is really cool, especially when you pull off a perfect dodge, or I guess with Carlos's case, a punch, which is really satisfying, by the way. But I call it a double-edged sword because you don't get defensive items anymore like you do in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And because of that, I usually just keep the knife in the item box because, like, outside of having to use it as a defense, like as a defense item, I would barely use a knife in any other Resident Evil game. Like, except for RE4, because the knife is actually really cool to use in the game. But with RE3 Remake, I just don't really see much use to use a knife, except for, I guess you could, like finish off a zombie that's already down, but I don't know. I just never really felt the need to use the knife to finish off a zombie. Maybe I will do that in one of my next playthroughs, which I've actually already played this game twice, by the way, but yeah, I didn't really use the knife that much in the other in my two playthroughs because I just really didn't feel the need to use it. Although maybe I do actually need to use it, or maybe I just have skill issue. I don't know. But yeah, pulling off a perfect dodge, even whether you do it intentionally or not, especially when going up against Nemesis, is really satisfying to use. Especially the slow-mo effect when you're aiming, and also with Carlos when like he gets a punch if you basically you can ram into enemies, and if you time it correctly, he'll punch an enemy, and it's just so cool. But yeah, not having defensive items in this game is definitely one of my issues with this game. As much as I like the dodge mechanic, I would have liked if Capcom kept in both that and the defensive items, but not everything is perfect. And the weapons, honestly, I don't really have much to say about them. I probably would if I unlocked the other unlockable weapons from the shop in the game, but yeah, I will say, like, using the pistol and getting like a perfect shot or whatever it's called is so satisfying. I don't know what triggers it, but it's so satisfying when it happens. So for story, this is definitely where a lot of people have most issue with the game, and I can definitely see why. I'll definitely have to refresh my memory on the OG Resident Evil 3. I don't think I'll play it on my PS3. I'll probably wait for the GOG version to come out later on. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to release this year, but yeah, the story is, ooh, like, it just feels so rushed. Like, things are happening way too fast. Like, I feel like Jill meets Carlos, like, I think, I don't know, like in the OG, she meets Carlos when you're like in a half hour of the game, I think. I don't know. I can't remember, but I remember meeting Carlos like I don't know. I think I had quite like more than a half hour on my first file when I met Carlos in the OG, like when I played the OG Resident Evil 3. Like, people also complained about the clock tower being cut out, and I can't really I don't know if I can't really vouch for the clock tower because, again, it's been so long since I played the OG Resident Evil 3, and I can't remember what the clock tower was like, but yeah, it is a shame that a good portion of Resident Evil 3's original story was cut out in the remake. And since we're talking about story stuff, let's talk about Nemesis. This is probably, like from a design standpoint, this is probably my favorite version of Nemesis. Like, he just looks like really, like he's big, like he's so, like he's just so intimidating, and I just love everything about his design, despite not having a perfect voice for the character. But then again, every other Nemesis voice I don't think has really topped the OG Nemesis at all. But yeah, this Nemesis is, I love this version of Nemesis, despite not being able, despite not encountering him a whole lot. Like his attacks, even before he gets his rocket launcher, like his attacks do so much damage, like even more than Mr. X. Like, they really emphasize that this is basically Umbrella's, like, this creature is Umbrella's pretty much magnum opus, and he was just so intimidating. And yeah, it just made fighting him, like when he had his flamethrower and such, it just made fighting him even more fun, especially when he basically turns into a xenomorph, and when he had to use the mines to stop him in his tracks, which might actually be my favorite boss in this game, and probably one of my favorite Resident Evil bosses in general. And the final boss, where Jill just takes the railgun and just fires it into Nemesis's mouth, is just, it's so good. Also, just gotta say, I freaking hate Nikolai in this game, and I love the fact that I hate him that much, because, oh man, Nikolai is such a good villain in this game. Like, I hate him for what he does to Jill and the other characters in this game, but at the same time, I love him because of how much a conniving bastard he is. And he's such a good villain. So despite all the positive things I had to say about this game, because of the negatives, this game is definitely one of the games I played this year. Like, it's definitely not a bad game, but I don't think I would put this in my top 5 favorite Resident Evil games, especially as soon as I play the other Resident Evil games. Like, it really felt like I was playing more so like a DLC of Resident Evil 2, and I don't know, it really just felt like the game just didn't last long enough, and that they really just, like, because of all the cut content and everything, it just felt like it needed more time. I'm stuttering. Like, the game just felt undercooked, really. And I feel like if they were allowed more dev time, they could have put in the cut content into the remake, which would have made a much better, like, more faithful adaptation of the original game. So overall, this game was definitely like a 7 or 7.5 out of 10, but hey, it's definitely one of the best 7 out of 10 games I played yet. I don't really know what to do for an outro for this video, so re 20th Century Boys.